these things, including us. Last time that I had a chance to talk to you guys, we talked about the origin of man and how Darwin got it wrong as far as where we came from. And the fact that Darwin made some very astonishing claims. So for example, some of his claims about human race were really quite offensive. For example, he said here in the Descent of Man, at some future period, not very distant, the civilized race of the man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races. And the break between man and his nearest allies would then be wider, even than the Caucasian and then some ape as low as the baboon, instead of now between the Negro or Australian and the gorilla. So it's a very racist view that he sees that the human being is not one race, like from Adam and Eve, but he sees that there are some higher, more civilized humans and savage ones, and therefore there should be a process of competition where the more civilized humans will exterminate the less civilized ones. And for us, this seems like it's as crazy that people would think this way. But he's only following the logic of his theory, right? Because if you believe that human beings evolved from ape-like creatures, that means that some lower animals, through competition, eventually gave rise to a higher animal, and that means that if that's the case, then during this competition, of course, some will evolve faster than others. And therefore some humans will evolve faster than others, and therefore some humans will be superior to others. So this is a natural kind of follow up to his belief, but of course it's wrong, right? So the Bible tells very clearly that we all came from Adam and Eve, and therefore all men are equal, all human beings are. There's no such thing as a superior or inferior human being, or civilized or savage, or whatever verse you want to call. But today, my focus is more, well, what is the basis? So Darwin came up with his idea of the truth, that we all came from one common. Now, how did he base this on? He didn't, obviously could not go back in time and see a living thing evolve gradually to many things. The only thing he could look at as far as the past history is the fossil record, right? All he can do is look at the fossils, which are a record of living things that have died, right, in the past that have died. And that's the only evidence he has to go on. Well, what did the evidence show? Now, let's take a look at his own book. So this is from The Origin of Species. So according to Darwin's theory, he says, well, living things, all living things came from one original ancestor. That means that over time, because there's a slow gradual change from one to another, there must be lots of intermediate forms left in the fossil record, okay? And this is what he says about that. He says, well, so must the number of intermediate varieties which have formerly existed on the earth be truly enormous. There should be enormous number of intermediate forms, right? Sometimes if cats and dogs came from one common ancestor, there should be a cat dog, some intermediate between the cat and the dog, right? For instance, right? So there should be all kinds of intermediates in the fossil record. Why then is not every geological formation and every stratum full of such intermediate links, right? If his theory is true, the fossil record should be full of these in-between forms. But geology assuredly does not reveal any such finely graduated organic chain. Perhaps is the most obvious and gravest objection which can be urged against my theory. The explanation lies, as I believe, in the extreme imperfection of the geologic record. Okay, so in other words, the evidence in front of him says there was no evolution, right? The evidence of the fossil record shows there are no now. Notice what the wording he says, that there will be enormous number of intermediate forms. Every stratum, everywhere, we're going to see these forms, okay? But in reality, we don't, right? So, but hold on, if that's the case, why does Darwin still believe his theory then? Well, the explanation is the bottom here. The explanation, he says here, I believe it's because of the extreme imperfection of our geological records. In other words, he says, well, I don't see the evidence right now contradicts my theory, but guess what? I believe, I'm hoping that in the future, as people dig out more and more the fossil record, the future discovery is going to contradict the present reality. Like right now, the evidence doesn't favor me. Right now, in fact, the evidence shows there was no evolution. There are none of these intermediate links that I'm looking for between different species of animals. But I'm hoping for the future to change that. Okay, so let's go to the pyramid here. So basically, Darwinism is based on Darwin's claims, and what are Darwin's claims based on? Well, it's not based on reality. You know, a lot of people have the misconception that Darwin looked at his observation of the nature and came up with his theory. Actually, the opposite, right? Because his theory is based on the past. So the only observation you can make of the past is the fossil record. And the fossil record, like I just said, contradicts his theory, right? So all he could do to base his theory on is hoping for future discoveries to overturn present realities. Okay. Now, unfortunately for Darwin, the future discoveries did not overturn those realities. No matter how much the fossil record we dig, we find the same pattern. There are no these types of intermediate forms. There are, in fact, even up to today, there's not one single indisputable form of intermediate between different types of animals. And notice, you know, sometimes when you talk to evolutionists, or they might try to point out one or two disputable examples. But notice that Darwin says very clearly, the number should be enormous, right? Why is not every geological formation, every strait and full of such form? Because evolution is really true, and all these animals were not specially created by God, and they gradually evolved. The fossil record should be full of all these intermediate forms, and they're not. Okay, so Darwin's claims, unfortunately, are based on a faulty foundation. And it gets worse because now Darwin didn't know anything about genes. So he bases all he had was the fossils. Now, not only do the fossils not agree with him, the genes also don't agree with him. So some of you may remember I shared with you one time about DNA barcoding. So this is technology that's used to identify different